Reflex 2, my dude's pretty pleased with a cherry on top. Dude, if they made a Reflex 2, I promise you, people would love this shit. There is without a doubt, no question about it, no ifs, ands, or but fucks about it. I'm not like kidding when I say that. It's not even really it's not like I'm even kind of having a theory that it might be like that. Like, I know for a fact it would be like that. There is a reason why 90% of the arcade motocross fan base out there considers Reflex the best motocross game of all time. That's because it is the greatest arcade motocross game of all time. It's not just like people just think that for nostalgic reasons or for no apparent good reason. I mean, it is just strictly because of how good the gameplay was and how good the track design was, and all that kind of stuff is why people love Reflex. And it's quite interesting whenever I go from playing MX vs. ATV All Out back to MX vs. ATV Reflex, because you can sort of feel that Reflex doesn't even have the movement that MX vs. ATV All Out has. If you guys know, that's always what I'm talking about when it comes to physics. It's got to have enough movement. You got to be able to move on the bike. Where's the movement? I feel too restricted. You know, that's always what I'm talking about. And when you go back to Reflex after playing MX vs. ATV All Out, it kind of feels like it's a little bit more restricted. You know, it feels like you really got to turn the bike over the jump face a little bit harder to get it to whip. It doesn't whip quite as fast. But that's kind of the whole point to this video, is what I'm saying is, you know, like in MX vs. ATV Supercross and Alive and Encore, all of those games were way too in that restricted zone. They were way too in that you could barely even whip the bike, you couldn't hardly move on the bike, and that eliminated all your skill gap. But when they went to MX vs. ATV All Out, it's like they went all out with it. You know, it's like they went the complete other side of the spectrum where you move like so much more. You move all, like MX vs. ATV All Out, it's almost like you move so much to the point to where it's unrealistic. You know, your movement on the bike is just unrealistic. When you come off a jump face and you're whipping, it's like it's just, you're whipping that thing just so insanity, you know, and being able to do 30 backflips over a 5-foot jump, it's crazy. And I understand an arcade motocross game is more about the fun, you know, it's not trying to be super realistic like a simulator, but what Reflex was always capable of doing is sort of like bringing both of those worlds together. Now that I look back at all these arcade motocross games, Reflex really is like a mixture between a simulator and an arcade motocross game, you know? It's like it is the most realistic arcade motocross game out there, in my opinion. And Reflex is kind of like that perfect balance. It's that perfect middle ground between not too much restriction, but enough restriction to where it doesn't just allow you to do these insanity triple 360 Travis Pastrana backflips and crap that, like, you know, just doesn't even look realistic at all. It looks more like a Nitro mobile game or something like that. It still keeps that realism. Reflex is like that perfect mixture between your, you know, super restricted MX vs. ATV Supercross Encore and your super crazy no restriction MX vs. ATV All Out. It's like that perfect mid ground, that perfect balance. And now that I go back to Reflex, I honestly truly do realize that now. It's like, whoa, now I kind of see how all this went down, you know? And it's just crazy. And Reflex was the first one that I really played for a long time. So I can understand how people might think I've got this like bias towards it or whatever, and there's this certain element of even I have to look back at it and be like, whoa, you got to be careful, Spencer, because Reflex was the first one that I really got into. I mean, I played the other ones back in the day, like Unleashed, Untamed, some of the really, really old ones way back in the day, but that was before I was really even into real-life motocross, so it just wasn't the same. Even though I did play them back then, it just wasn't the same as whenever I first got into Reflex and first got into real-life motocross. That's when it like really started to become a thing where I really tried to get good at the game and played it every day and stuff, and just simply, I guess I just thought that, you know, all arcade motocross games should have been more like Reflex, or like the one after Reflex should have been like Reflex but better. And in fact, it was worse than Reflex, and the game just got worse and worse and worse after Reflex. But finally, with this MX versus ATV All Out, I know some people don't like it, but finally there's more of that movement back in it. Even though they kind of went maybe a little too far with it, there's finally movement again. I mean, that's a big step in the right direction. Now it's just a matter of tuning it and toning it back down to like it was in Reflex, and really getting that really getting those jump difficulties and motocross track design layouts down, and all those different little intricacies that Reflex did really well. The MX versus ATV series has potential again, because now they've actually got movement with the bike again. Now they've actually got skill gap with the bike again. And I just cannot stress how important that is, because if you don't have enough movement on the bike, it don't matter about anything else in the game. It don't matter how good your track design is. It don't matter how good your replications are. It doesn't matter how good your corners are. It doesn't matter how good your ruts are. Nothing else matters if you don't have enough movement on the bike. You understand? Like, that is kind of the core to everything of the physics. The physics is the core to any motocross game, and the movement of the physics is the core to the physics of the game. So when you look at it, I mean, the movement is everything to it. Like with MX Simulator, you've got this just absolutely insanity amount of movement, but you slowly work it up over time. It's one of those things there's like so many different editing sliders and setup sliders in that game that you can really change like a real life dirt bike over time, and really adjust your setup and movement on the bike over time in that game, because it's so hard to learn, because that's just how much movement and skill gap that game has. But like with an arcade game, you can't have that much of adjustability in the setup part of it, or it's just a simulator at that point, right? Well, Reflex kind of found that it happened to find struck that perfect balance between the two, of a simulator and an arcade game. And now I realize that. Back in the day, I just thought this was how all arcade games were, but come to find out that's really not the case. Reflex is actually the legend of them all. Reflex was actually the best of them all. It just happened to be the first one that I really, really got into, but I was sort of in that mindset that all of them were this good, just that, well, this was the first one that I played, so the next one it should be better, how could it be worse? These games surely just improve over time, but it's kind of like that Call of Duty syndrome in a certain sense as well, where you've got games that try to change too much, and then when they find something good, there's no reason to stray away from it. Don't fix what isn't broken. You understand what I'm saying? Reflex is not broken. Why don't you make a Reflex 2? My dude, I don't get it. It's not hard. It's easy. I don't understand why we don't have a Reflex 2 or Reflex something. I just do not understand why they haven't went down that route or tried to really replicate those Reflex physics. And I know some people out there just love the Alive physics, or just love whatever, and I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, do not understand those people at all. I really, really don't, because Reflex is just on another level of skill gap, and the people that understand that, it's like we instantly get put into this category of, oh, we're just Reflex fanboys, or, oh, we just want a motocross game that's too difficult, or, all those kind of standard, typical sort of boxes that they try to put you in. But I just think this is how all arcade motocross games should be. That's my thought process on it. Like, this is how they should all be. Why are they not all like this? Why? I don't get it. It just creates such a skill gap in a motocross game whenever you strike that perfect physics balance. And these motocross games just have so much trouble with it. They honestly do. And you can't really compare like Reflex to the older games, I don't feel like, because obviously that was back when they didn't even have dual stick controls. I'm basically just talking about all the games past the dual stick control, super innovative integration into if you look back in history, the dual stick controls in motocross that Reflex brought to the games, it was the first one to really have that in any motocross game out there, that will go down in history as the biggest, most innovative feature in any arcade motocross game. And not to mention, Reflex was the first one to really put a terrain deformation system in there as well. All of those things just tie into making Reflex the legendary. It's the one, dude. Like, hi, King. How you doing? You're the best ever. You're a legend, baby. Like, straight up, Reflex is the greatest. So it's kind of one of those things. If I was a video game developer, I understand they always have to innovate. They always have to try to do something new. Somebody doesn't just want to sit there and play the same game over and over and over for 30 years straight. Like, I get it. But at the same time, if you go back and look, the past 4 or 5 years, or I guess like 6 or 7 years now in the motocross gaming world, everyone just moved to Reflex on PC. That's where pretty much the entire community went, was just Reflex on PC. They were still spitting out the arcade motocross games. You had MX vs. ATV Alive, MX vs. ATV Supercross, and then Supercross Encore. All those games were still coming out. But where was everybody at? They were on the PC version of Reflex, built an entire PC Reflex custom track community, had thousands of custom tracks come out for this game, and the people that didn't get into that just didn't have a PC or wasn't really into PC gaming, because if you were, that's the game you were playing, like straight up. You might have went on some of those other arcade games just to, fuck around and screw around with it or whatever, but Reflex on PC was where your skill base was. That's where your racing went down. That's where your true time and all that stuff went into, was Reflex on PC. Straight up, dude. So, like, are we just going to keep coming out with these motocross games that people play for like a year straight and then they're basically done with it and they go to the next one? Or, I don't know. I mean, me being an MX Simulator player, when you find that motocross game that you can just soak in thousands and thousands of hours for multiple years and it's still a relevant game, you can still use that skill that you put into, it's like you build this sort of, let's see, how do I actually explain that? It's like you almost build this real life type of status, I guess is the right word. You know how like Eli Tomac in real life has a status. Ryan Villapoto in real life has a status, like, they're remembered for the things that they did in those times, and you become legends, and that's how it felt like in Reflex. You had your Reflex legends, you had your pro racing in Reflex, and with MX Simulator, it's like that, but tenfold. You've got, it's like it just builds this real life version of motocross, but it's just in a virtual world, and that's what's so crazy about MX Simulator, and when you find the game like that you just soaked in all that time into, and you become this certain person in the game, and you have this certain status, like I've won this many races, or I became this guy. It just seems so silly to think about them coming out with another arcade motocross game that you're going to quit playing in a year. It's like, what? I don't know. It starts to build up this thought process of, it's like you don't really care about those games like that as much as you do the ones that really last. The ones that last, 5, 6, 7 years and still have a relevant fan base, like how Reflex was, and MX Simulator, they've built upon each other in a certain way. It's kind of interesting how that all happened. You had your Reflex on PC for all of your fan bases that didn't want, that was kind of your arcade side of the true fan base. That's where everyone was at. And then you had your simulator side. Everybody was into MX Simulator. And I feel like there's always going to be that. There's always, your MX Simulator is always going to have its place. You're never going to have something that replaces MX Simulator. And you're always going to have an arcade game of some sort that fills that sort of void, that arcade where it's not quite as hard as MX Simulator, but it still has a super skill gap. That's why Reflex lasted so long. So that's always the thought process that hits your head, like, oh, yeah, well, MX vs. ATV All Out, that's cool and all. Like, we'll play it for a good little while and have fun, but is it going to start having PC custom tracks, and then is it going to last like 6 or 7 years? Probably not. It's just crazy when you start going down that thought process road, but what always hits my mind is, like, the only way to really ever move past that or fix that or whatever you want to call it is you're going to have to make a Reflex replica or a Reflex 2 or something like that at some point for those people to get back into it like they were in Reflex. That's the only way. It's just they're never going to build that sort of dedication and real life type of status, fan base, all that kind of stuff. It's never going to happen unless you make something that is just damn near exactly like the physics of Reflex. I mean, I'm talking like you can adjust it without a doubt, and obviously you'd be adjusting the tracks and stuff like that, but it's got to be just damn near 99.9% like Reflex was, you know? And that's just what it comes down to, and it's been proven over time. All the people that say, "Oh, Reflex really wasn't that good," "Oh, dude, you're dick riding Reflex," or whatever. It's like, dude, look at how long Reflex has lasted. It's not even up for debate at this point. Which arcade motocross game was the best? It's not even up for debate, dog. Reflex was the greatest, is the greatest of all time. So it's like, I don't know. If I was a motocross gaming developer, that would be the first thing I'd be trying to do. Like, yeah, you might have made some mistakes just trying to innovate and make some of these different motocross games, but let's hone it back in, dude. Let's get it more like Reflex. Let's get that shit back together like it was back in those days. Let's, really try to make that solid game again. And they've struggled ever since Reflex with that dual stick control, trying to get it back to that super realistic feel like Reflex had. It's just, I don't know. I mean, but the test of time, dude, that's everything to these motocross games, and Reflex has stood the test of time. It's been proven, dude. Like, people would not make thousands and thousands of custom tracks for a motocross video game if it wasn't amazing, if it didn't have the lasting potential. I promise you they would not make that many custom tracks for it. So that's what I'm saying. Like with Reflex, it's just an amazing game, dude. And I know a lot of people out there want the Reflex 2. I've been wanting a Reflex 2 ever since Reflex. It's just so hard to ever, like I'm saying, those other motocross games are fun to go mess around on and play for a little while, but it just doesn't grab your like full attention like Reflex did. It doesn't really grab your full want to sit there and just play it every single night in that super skill gap and feel like you're always getting better at the game, and super competitive races and all of the different track content it just built when everybody started doing the PC thing on Reflex, and it just got crazy, man. It got to a whole nother level. So I just think it's always important to look back and, realize the history and, realize the mistakes that you make and try to get it back to like it was at a legendary point. I think that is a very important thing. I personally feel that way, and it's okay to continue to have different motocross games coming out. Like, that's a cool thing, and they're trying different stuff, and I understand all that, but I just feel like there needs to be that updated Reflex version. There needs to be that Reflex 2, not like a Modern Warfare remaster. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that's very, very similar to Reflex, but it's a whole new motocross game, That's really what I'm getting into here, because we still have Reflex, right? I guarantee Reflex will still be the game on PC even after the official Monster Energy Supercross game and MX vs. ATV All Out. I guarantee you everybody will still be making custom tracks on Reflex, still be playing Reflex. I guarantee, even after all that time. It's just unreal to imagine Reflex is still the game after all of those other games, all those years. MXGP 1, 2, 3, official Monster Energy Supercross, MX vs. ATV Alive, MX vs. ATV Supercross, Encore. And Reflex is still the game. Like, that is just unreal. That is just insane, dude. In the arcade realm, obviously, is what I'm talking about. But, yeah, I just feel like there's always a sort of spot for that. Like, it's like MX Simulator, but it's an arcade motocross game. You know what I mean? Where you got the pro racing and you got the the just different tiers to the skill, and you got all the different custom track, easily made custom track kind of editor on PC and stuff like that. And the MXGP Pro thing's looking pretty cool. I mean, that's, you know, some of the closest potential I've seen to having that sort of game in the near future. But like MX vs. ATV All Out is cool for what it is, without a doubt. It's a cool game, and it's one of those where you can have a lot of fun whipping on, a lot of fun doing the free riding, and I can guarantee I'm going to be putting in way more time into MX vs. ATV All Out than I did in Alive and MX vs. ATV Supercross and Encore and all that. I'll be putting way more time into All Out than I did those games, because it's just fun. You know, it's got that fun factor of like crazy whips, crazy stuff. But and I think it was cool to do one game like that. But I think it's time for the MX vs. ATV All Out developers to bring her back around, hone it back down, get it back to that reflex level. You know, we got to get it back closer to this point. And yeah, that's just my own personal opinion. I think a lot of it is track design. I think a lot of it, you know, is that's where I think MX vs. ATV All Out kind of slipped up a little bit. Their outdoor tracks all almost feel identical, but just different biomes. They kind of have a very, very similar feeling. Not quite difficult enough, I feel like, on the motocross actual obstacle sections and stuff. I feel like the Supercross tracks are pretty cool, but they can kind of give you that bit of a, I don't know, maybe not quite as difficult as Reflex was, but it just kind of all goes back to that physics system. You know, you can sit here and talk about track design all you want, but if the game doesn't have that real hardcore level reflex physics system, then it's just not going to be as hard as Reflex. It's not going to feel as difficult as Reflex. It will not have the skill gap of Reflex if you don't have the physics like Reflex. It's just, there's no other way to do it. There is no other way to do it. And like I'm saying, MX Simulator has already got the simulator realm dominated. You're not going to beat MX Simulator. I mean, you can come out with different simulators, and it's kind of cool and fun to go try them out, like MX Bikes and shit like that, but I feel like Reflex is sort of the MX Simulator of the arcade realm. You understand what I'm saying? It's the GOAT of the arcade realm, still to this day. And so it's just kind of one of those things. It's like, you know, and then you got the LCQ Studios trying to make the game that's like a perfect mixture between an arcade motocross game and a simulator. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like Reflex is just an arcade game, even though to the naked eye nowadays it would almost look like a arcade mixed with a simulator because of how unrealistic some of these arcade games have been here recently. But yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to see kind of what goes down in the future. But I mean, can you go wrong with the Reflex 2? I honestly don't think so. I really don't think you can go wrong with it. And I think the fans would be happy. Just put you some different cool biome free ride tracks in there. Put you some really cool Supercross tracks. Maybe kind of get away from that trying to make the replica tracks, because I feel like the official Monster Energy Supercross game kind of has that on lockdown in the arcade sense. Like, your replica tracks really need to come from either your custom track user community or something like that. You know, I don't really feel like it. What I'm saying is, I feel like MX vs. ATV All Out would have been better if they just made their own random Supercross tracks instead of trying to make replica Supercross tracks. You understand what I'm saying? I think the Supercross tracks would have been better if it would have just been like random biome Supercross tracks, like some outdoor ones, some indoor ones, kind of like Reflex. Pretty sure all the Supercross tracks in Reflex were pretty much indoor, but still they were like their own unique designs. You could tell it wasn't like a replica of any Supercross track. So felt like that was really cool how they went down that route in Reflex. And the outdoor tracks, you know, making their own unique designs on that as well is very important. But yeah, man, this is just another Reflex 2 video. We'll see if we get it someday. You know, sometimes I kind of feel like you're hoping for something that's never going to happen, and I'm not really sure why that is. I don't know if it's they can't get the exact files. You You know, I'm not really sure. It seems like it would be easy. You know what I mean? It seems like it'd be easy to make a Reflex 2 or something, but it's really, could you imagine the fucking hype people would have for that? People would lose their damn minds, and for a good reason, man. That's a game I feel like you could actually truly hype over before it comes out. You understand what I'm saying? Like a Reflex 2, that would be like, fuck yes, dog. Get hyped the fuck up for that. Because you basically know what you're getting when there's a title like that out there. But for unproven games, I don't really understand where a super hype comes from for that. But like with you know, a Reflex 2, I mean, just the title alone, dude, oh, that'd be crazy. That would just be insane if they did that. Or make like a, I don't know, maybe it's not titled Reflex, but you can somehow tell it's basically like a Reflex 2. I don't know. It would be very interesting. And getting the terrain deformation more back to like it was in Reflex. Getting the physics more back to like they were in Reflex. I'm not saying it has to be exact. You know, a lot of people get that twisted. It's like, we already have a Reflex. I don't want another Reflex. I just want one that's very, very similar physics-wise, but it's the next motocross game. You know, it's innovative next motocross game, but very, very similar physics system and stuff like that. You know, just to kind of extend the longevity of that Reflex level kind of feeling that you had for those 7 or 8 years that everybody played Reflex for all that time. So either way, man, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.